Welcome to Fun with Annuities with your host, me, Stan the Annuity Man, America's annuity agent. Can annuities be fun? Can contractual guarantees be fun? Absolutely they can. Find out the brutal facts about annuities with no sales pitches or high-pressure nonsense. Just the brutal and factual annuity truth, which is all you need to hear. Let's have some fun with annuities, and let's have that fun start right now. Welcome to Fun with Annuities. I'm your host, Stan the Annuity Man, America's annuity agent, licensed in all 50 states, and I am so happy that you joined us this week. And if you hear a little bit of an echo in the background, it's the reason is I'm in Florida, and our guest today is in Malta. And if you don't know where Malta is, that is in between Sicily and the North African coast. There's a reason that he's in Malta. His name is Bradley Birkenfeld, and let me give you a little bit of background on Bradley. As an international private banker, he exposed how the Union Bank of Switzerland, known as UBS, and by the way, I should work for UBS as well, they're the world's largest bank, and he exposed how they helped ultra-wealthy Americans commit billions and billions of dollars of tax fraud. And his revelations, and man, they were bombshell ones, pretty much cracked the code of what was believed to be an impenetrable fortress. You just couldn't get through the Swiss banks. But he proved that offshore financial institutions were systematically aiding clients in tax evasion, corruption, terrorist activities, etc. His case triggered monumental changes in the banking laws and the federal tax code and international tax treaties as well. In 2005, despite a thriving career at places like Credit Suisse, Barclays Bank, and UBS, he couldn't take it anymore, and he said, you know what, I've got to do something about this. He went to UBS and he said, hey, we need to clean this up, and they rejected him, and he then turned to the U.S. authorities. Unfortunately, and he'll tell the story, he spent 30 months in jail, but was vindicated. And he was vindicated in a big way, not only just because he did the right thing, but monetarily. He got the largest IRS whistleblower reward of all time, which was, I think it's still a record, $104 million for turning in and exposing this tax fraud. And his work has helped the U.S. Treasury to recover to date over $25 billion in back taxes. And it set off a domino effect of international investigations and offshore banking and those type of crimes. He's now retired. He's a philanthropist. He lives in Malta. He calls it the Pirates Island. Once again, I apologize for a little bit of the echo, but he's in Malta and I'm in Florida. So, technology works until it doesn't, but hang in there with me. This is important. We're also going to be talking about his book, Lucifer's Banker, and you can reach back and read about that at lucifersbanker.com. Lucifer's is plural, lucifersbanker.com. With that being said, welcome to Fun with Annuities, Bradley Birkenfeld.
It's a pleasure to be here, Stan, and welcome from sunny Malta. As you rightly pointed out to your audience, we're south of Sicily, north of Libya, so we're right in the middle of the Med. And it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Stan.
Perfect audio on your side, so I'm not going to talk as much, which is probably the people on all the podcast platforms and the YouTube channel Fun with Annuities are like, yay! So let's jump into this quickly, and we're going to spend as much time as you will allow us, because you're the most fascinating guest that I can imagine us having on. Obviously, you're originally you're a Boston Bruins fan. I say obviously because I've done so much research on you. Give us some background about you growing up in Massachusetts and how you got in the financial services business. Let's establish that foundation.
Sure. When I grew up in south of Boston in a little rural community on the water, had two older brothers, and went to a nice private school and met some very good friends and had academia and athletics. So I really had a good upbringing with two loving parents. So it was an environment that was conducive to, that neighborhood feeling of the 80s, back then when things really worked, people played outside and got along and so forth. Mm-hmm. Then when I graduated high school, I went to a private military school up in Vermont where ROTC was founded, Norwich University, the oldest private military school in the country. And I did my ROTC there, but didn't go in, and spent a semester overseas in London because I was an econ major. So that was quite interesting, but it was right after the 1987 stock market crash. So people were getting fired who had career jobs, and I just wanted to work there for the summer. So I had to come back to Boston and continue working at a bank where I was working summers in college called State Street Global Advisors, or State Street Bank, the investment arm of the bank. And I started there, I did 2 summers of internships, but then started full-time in 1988 when I graduated college. And I worked as a currency trader there. So I was talking to countries around the world, trading billions of dollars in all the notes prior to the euro. So this was pre-euro, this is 1988, 89. And it was an interesting time because you saw so many things developing quite quickly, and the fall of Romania with Ceausescu and all of these different things. The European Economic Union was sort of trying to come to its fruition. So it was a very interesting time for me as a young man trading currencies for institutional pension plans. So after I did that, I started seeing some illegal things even at the bank, which I talk about in the book. And I just didn't want to be a part of it. I was a young guy working hard, and I thought, geez, this is not what I signed up for. So they pretty much put me into this little probation kind of thing, and then ultimately fired me because I wouldn't play ball. So I said, fine, you want to play that game? We can play the same game. So I went to the annual meeting of the bank and exposed them, and then went to the FBI and exposed them. But the FBI was as corrupt as the bank, because that was the same FBI as the Whitey Bulger cover-up in the FBI field office in Boston.
Oh my goodness! So you actually, UBS wasn't the first whistleblower. You were whistleblowing. You had morals from the start, is what I'm hearing.
That's correct, and it's documented. I went to the FBI. I talked to them. They, the district attorney, who was Robert Mueller, didn't pursue the case.
Oh my!
I mean, it's you can't write this stuff. Really, it's really something else. And so you had the FBI with the Whitey Bulger nonsense. You had Robert Mueller, who wouldn't investigate it. I had sworn affidavits. I had testimony. I met with the FBI probably 6 times. It's a farce. It's a total farce. These guys are useless beyond useless. They say they're enforcing crime and criminals and terrorists. Nothing could be further from the truth. And I can tell you, I lived it. I saw it. I saw it in Boston. I saw it in Washington. So these guys are really bad news. You're either part of the problem or part of the solution. Well, they're not part of the solution, so by default, they are the problem.
So getting off topic just a second, because you threw me with the Robert Mueller thing. When you saw him get appointed, what was, without being political, because we have listeners on both sides of the aisle, what was your thought?
I just said to myself, how do you keep perpetuating the same pathetic problems by putting these people in positions of power? Wow. James Comey sat on the board of HSBC. That's the same HSBC that did not find the drug cartel for laundering billions of dollars. How is this possible? But this is the fix, Stan. You put a person of power who can pick up the phone and call their friends and fix the problem. And this is where we're going to get into Lucifer's Banker Uncensored, because you're going to begin to see what you read, the problem, the inherent, ingrained problem with government. There's the revolving door. Mm-hmm. There's the protect your backside and all your buddies, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, doesn't matter. I'll call a spade a spade. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem we have here is this has been going on for so long. It's almost impossible to change it, because these people are really in there for too long a period, and they're friends. So there's tiers of these corrupt individuals, civil servants.
It's the unbelievably accelerated level of the good old boys network.
Precisely correct. Now, ask yourself this question. In the financial crisis, Eric Holder didn't prosecute anyone. Not one bank. I mean, this is just countrywide, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, Credit Suisse, Barclays, Morgan Stanley, Lehman Brothers, any of them? Nobody. But you did put one banker in jail, the whistleblower who brought you the biggest tax scandal in U.S. history, in the world. So you go, oh boy, you caught me. I was there going to you and giving you this information, and then you turned it on me. So
you left State Street, and then you went to a firm, I believe it's called Union Charter, correct?
No, I actually went to Switzerland to get my master's degree.
Okay.
And then while I was in getting my master's in Switzerland, I was actually recruited, or actually I went for an interview at Credit Suisse Private Banking, and I was hired.
Okay.
And yeah, the head of the private bank really liked me. He saw my skill set. He understood that I was dynamic and outgoing, and I wanted to fix things. I wanted to make things work. And I was going to be his right-hand man. Well, I talk about him in my book, Dr. Caligari, very nice gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
And he then got transferred to Asia, and he said, come with me to Singapore. And I didn't want to go because I wanted to stay in Switzerland. I figured it was too much of a jump. I had just finished my master's, and this was a good opportunity. So I stayed. He actually got blown out in the Asian currency crisis a couple of years later, in 98.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed in Switzerland. And then I moved from Credit Suisse to Barclays Private Bank in Geneva.
Okay.
And then I worked there for about 4 years and did a lot of work within North America and in the UK. And then I was headhunted up to UBS in Geneva in Switzerland, and I became the head of business development for all of North America.
Interesting. And then, so you're in Switzerland, you work for UBS, and disclaimer, I used to be a retail broker and advisor at UBS a long, long time ago, and was there when they were doing the Swiss annuities and all that. So, Bradley is certainly familiar with what was going on. So you're at UBS, and obviously reading your book and looking at the pictures in the middle of the book, things were going well for you, obviously financially, personally. It was really, really good.
Yeah, it was.
Go ahead.
It was a fantastic opportunity because as a foreigner, I needed a work permit. And by the time 5 years passed, which was at Barclays, I got something called a C permit from a B permit. In essence, you were Swiss, but you couldn't vote, or you couldn't go in the military. Two things I could care less about. So I was essentially entrenched there. I had worked for 3 major banks. I was a director at UBS. I managed around $450 million.
Mm-hmm.
I've traveled the world, had great clients. Always made the money, go out of my way, not just to sell the UBS product as my bosses wanted me to do. Sure. I always confronted them, as you know,
exactly.
is sell what the client wants, not what the bank wants. And this was the biggest grind, if you will. So I did a lot of good things for my clients. And, some were difficult, some were very easy. You know how the business is. And
sure. People
with a lot of money who are doing it offshore, of course, are a special breed, of course.
Yeah,
but we had such a great situation, but I cared a lot about several people. And this is what people have to understand. I cared about my colleagues, I cared about the clients, and I cared about the shareholders of the bank. Because what the bank was essentially doing was lying to all of them. And that's really where the problem came. And I said, wait a minute now. I mean, it's good to make money. You can do what you want. Offshore banking's legal in Switzerland. That's fine. But when you're telling us to leave Switzerland, to go market aggressively to the brokers at Hayne Weber, the former UBS,
sure.
Hayne Weber,
it was
we weren't licensed to do this. But yet they were so hungry to get more money in, net new money, and raise the revenue and all this kind of stuff. You know the story.
Yes.
And I just said, this is not a good business model. This is not something that we signed up for. I mean, if people come and want to open accounts in Switzerland, great. And you had legacy accounts and they were generating revenue and all that good stuff. We don't sign people's tax returns. That's their business. So this was sort of a catch-22 here. And that's where I finally said, when a 3-page document was presented to me from our intranet, our internal computer system, I said to my colleague, where did you get this? And that's where I realized they were setting us up for a fall, because they said, well, if you don't read the memo and you have a problem, that's your fault. There's the memo. And I thought, I'm gonna checkmate you and say, no, I'm not signing up for this. I want to know why this has been put in our system, why we weren't trained on it, and why we weren't told about it.
What did that document say? What was the key? Tell our listeners that, because it sounds like this was the fork in the road for you.
It was definitely the fork in the road. And what happened was, this document, first and foremost, I mean, I don't sit and look on the intranet. I mean, there's thousands of pages of compliance and documents and whatever. So my colleague brought it to me. So that was the first shock. Like, hey, wait a minute. I'm a director of the bank. I manage people, manage a lot of money. And you're not telling me about this? So I just my colleague finds out my mistake and shows it to me. Then there was no training on the document. Generally, you train your bankers. Like, hey, we've got a new policy, or we got a new memo, or whatever. So those two things initially were the big red light that said, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. So I backed up and I said, uh-oh. So I took it and went to my boss. I said, what the hell is this? He said, oh, don't make a big deal. Don't make a big deal. You're putting these kids at risk because you guys are greedy? I said, no, this is bullshit. I threw it at him. I walked out the door. I was furious. I'll never forget that day. And I went back to my desk and I made 2 copies. I put it in my briefcase and took it home. And I thought, this is the turning point. This is where bank secrecy is over, because they can't continue playing this game where you do the business, but you're taking such a legal risk and you're not paid to take that risk. Something's going to happen. Someone's going to get caught and the whole thing will just explode.
So in essence, what they were doing, and this is, big banks and big brokerages have the big buildings for a reason, kind of like life insurance companies. What they were doing was saying, sell our stuff, do what we tell you, but you absorb all and shoulder all risk. Am I hearing that right?
That is correct. And the 3-page document's in the book. People can read it. It's called the Cross Country Border Paper, which now the IRS and the DOJ and the FBI and all these wonderful folks refer to cross-border transactions. Well, that was thanks to moi. I was the one who had to educate these clowns. And the question is, where's the DOJ been for the last 50 years? This is the problem. The U.S. government is aiding and abetting tax evasion, and they're a party to criminal conduct. You got Joe Biden in Geneva today. Why would you even give them the time of day when 100 Swiss banks signed agreements with the U.S. Department of Justice to stop the business and pay big multi-million-dollar fines? Why would you give them any attention whatsoever to this country when they're still holding back some information? Why?
Just to interject again, the book is called Lucifer's Banker, and you can go to lucifersbanker.com. You can buy this on Amazon, which is where I purchased my copy. It is, you can't put it down. And as I was joking with Bradley before, I mean, when is this going to be a movie? And he's like, well, we're working on it. And he actually, you can tell people about this, Bradley, about the movie thought and where you're headed with the book, because the book is a virtual movie. I'm telling you.
I had a ghostwriter, to be honest. He helped me, assemble it. And you know how books are. It's not what you put in it, it's what you don't put in it as well. It's a balancing act. So the book actually has come out in such a way that we added some more information about France and Canada and the UK, Greece. And it just shows the ingrained corruption, once again, that I've exposed, which nobody wants to talk about. Governments are really afraid to talk to me because it's such a hot potato. It's a nuclear bomb, if you will, because this is adversely affecting not just the banks, the lawyers, the accountants, the trustees, but the politicians. Because in my case, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, got involved in an international criminal investigation. Why? Why not Treasury? Why not FBI? Because her donors had offshore money. Now, out of the 19,000 accounts that your audience is going to hear about, we had 19,000 Americans with $20 billion in assets. Now, that was one bank of 130 banks in Switzerland in one country. So think about that for a moment. So these are, and America's a hard country to manage offshore because it's hard to get money in and out and so forth, but they're quite sophisticated. Okay. So out of the 19,000 accounts in our universe, where we were making around $200 million a year in profit, pure profit, the Hillary only demanded 4,700 account names. Why not all 19,000? That's a 75% failure rate. So the first is, why is she involved in an international criminal investigation? The second is, why didn't she get all the names? The third, my big boss testified at the US Senate, and he pled the fifth. But he had a non-prosecution agreement, so he committed a felony, and the DOJ allowed it and let him go back to Switzerland a free man.
So you do the right thing, and you go to jail. How's that work?
The only one to go to jail.
Yeah, how's that work again? And tell us a little bit of the details about that.
Again, my read on the U.S. government, and it's a very sad story, to be honest with you, is the U.S. government is very corrupt. The alliances they've had with Switzerland, and this is very important for your audience to understand. There's an article on my website back from 2004 when I was working at the bank. And people say, well, why would you put an article from 2004? This is critical to understand. The Federal Reserve fined UBS $100 million back in 2004 because they were sending currencies to 3 countries that were not allowed to get monies. They were blocked by the US: Cuba, Libya, and Iran. Okay, 2004, we're going back now, 17 years ago. So nobody went to jail, nobody lost their job, and the bank just wrote a check for $100 million to the Fed. Now, not 95.7 million, not 110 million, 100 million. Sounds too sexy. There's the other problem. Who represented the US interests in Cuba, Libya, and Iran in 2004? Switzerland. So if you indict UBS, you're indicting the Swiss government. And that didn't happen. So now you begin to realize, that's why Joe Biden is sitting in Geneva today talking to Putin. Really? So you guys got these backdoor deals with Switzerland, cheating guys like you and I and your audience, where you pay your taxes, but that these guys can get away with this nonsense? That's a fact. It's not my opinion, it's a fact. That article's in the New York Times, 2004, it's on my website, you can read it, and Switzerland was in bed with the US. Why did Barack Obama send $1.3 billion in cash from Geneva to Tehran on a private jet? Why? Geneva? Does he have a bank account in Geneva? Does the Fed have a bank account in Geneva? Uh-huh.
So when you're in prison for 30 months, and I think that's the most horrific, I can't believe that happened because you were doing the right thing. You're sitting in there and thinking, like, I've got to write this book. And I mean, what were you thinking in there? Because obviously that you never thought that would happen. You were doing the right thing. You were taking the high road and someone ran you off the road, literally and figuratively. Yep. What's going through your mind as you're sitting in there for I think it was 30 months, right?
It was 2.5 years. You're correct. And it wasn't a real jail. It was called, as in my book, I called it, it was called the camp. We called the camp cupcake. Sure. Because it was quite it was actually a joke because the taxpayers paid for this nonsense. And the people in there had the most ridiculous crimes. I mean, I saw a guy in there who gave a 3-piece suit to a politician. He got 6 months in jail. I mean, what? This is not justice. This is a business. And so it's building prisons and this and that and uniforms and lawnmowers and snow blowers. And they just spend all this money on these prison systems when, in fact, most of these people at a camp, this is the lowest level you can be in, which I was in. So there was no prison cell. There was no fence. I mean, some guys ran through the woods and would break the rules. But, you know, you had a lot of freedom, but you were incarcerated.
But it obviously motivated you to tell more, right?
Look, this is precisely it, Stan. And what people have to realize, and I'm sure your audience knows people who unfortunately have been incarcerated, and most of them wrongfully. And what happened was I went on my way to help a lot of these guys and do appeals and do all these things within the justice system. And then I said, I'm going to write this book. But what was fascinating was when I started my Whistleblower in 2005 and quit my job, I wasn't fired. I quit UBS. I was being paid about $1.5 million a year. I was the highest paid banker in Switzerland because I negotiated a bonus contract, which I talk about. Anyways, so when people say, oh, he did all this for the money, that's a lie. Because if you look at the timeline, I quit UBS in 2005, October. The law wasn't passed until December 2006. So a year and a half later, the law was passed. So there's no way I could have known what was going to be coming in the future for legislation. That's the first thing. And it's important because people always say, oh, you did it for the money. No, I didn't, because the law wasn't there. And I didn't even know about the law. Secondly, when I was in jail, my attorneys came to me with like 6 months left and told me that they were going to pay me. I fired my first attorneys and hired the man who actually wrote the law in the Senate Finance Committee, Dean Zerbe, great attorney, and still my attorney today. So what they've done is he actually wrote the law. So, Judge, if you have a question, ask my attorney. He's the guy who authored the law. And what happened was the IRS hated me. DOJ hated me because I made them look like the morons they are. And the IRS whistleblowing office, which was created, I was the first guy in the door, gave him the biggest case in the history of the world. So they said, we're going to pay this guy. And it didn't matter. The DOJ thought by indicting me, I wouldn't get paid. Well, the law got changed. And unfortunately for them, they realized that that didn't work. I did get paid. And it made them look even more stupid. Because one, well, that's your job to uncover this kind of thing. Where have you been?
Right.
You didn't do anything. Second, it takes a whistleblower to walk in the door and put the smell under your nose and say, this is what's going on. And they still didn't get it. And they screwed up the case. So it was a mishmash of all these departments and agencies: Treasury, DOJ, State Department, White House. Tim Geithner was involved, Mr. Turbo Tim. I mean, I'm not a genius.
Gosh, these names keep surfacing.
Right? And this is the problem. So you got Hillary Clinton and Tim Geithner and Eric Holder, all these cons, and Barack Obama. Barack Obama was playing golf with the chairman of UBS the day I got sentenced.
Wow.
On Martha's Vineyard. You can check it. It's the article's on my website. I mean, it's frightening. Even worse, the U.S. Senate I went to, the DOJ said, you have to give us all these names. I said, I can't. I need a subpoena, otherwise I go to jail in Switzerland where I'm from. And they said, we're not giving it to you. I said, you're not getting the names. So I said, fuck you, I'm going over to the Senate. Oh, we almost got in a fist fight in the DOJ. It was incredible. I mean, these guys are real childish. So I had my attorneys take me to the Senate. The Senate loved me. It said, here's a subpoena. I said, here are the names. I testified for 10 hours. So that committee I went to, Carl Levin, the U.S. Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, had hearings, but they would never call me in live because they knew I would embarrass all of them because they screwed up the case. But they said, oh, well, we arrested this guy. You arrested me because I came to you and gave the information. But you let all my bosses go. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's crazy. And I read an article the other day just about there's a big stink about really rich people not paying taxes again. Is this still happening, Bradley? What's going on right now? I mean, has anything changed?
It has. In Switzerland, they have been destroyed, decimated.
Okay.
The compliance has been improved. Profits are down considerably because they can't sell secrecy anymore. Those numbered accounts are over.
Okay.
So 100 Swiss banks have come in and paid fines to the U.S. government. I mean, think about that. I caused 100 banks to change their policies for the good. Second, paid fines, penalties, and interest. And the money from the clients have all come back from Swiss banks to American banks, been invested and taxed through perpetuity.
Sure.
I've brought back probably $200 billion to the U.S. government. And transforming a $1 trillion industry at the same time. I've helped foreign governments like France and Germany. And I testified in the French trial recently against UBS. And the verdict will be out in September on that. Probably about 3 billion euro. So you begin to realize this is a worldwide problem. The problem is the Fed, the European Central Bank, all these idiots have not got the testicular fortitude to come forward and say, no, we're going to put CEOs in jail and we're going to fine you 5 times what the normal fine is. And if you don't like it, we'll take your bank charter. It's that simple. Instead, these guys play politics. Oh, geez, I might get a job later with your firm. Like Comey went to HSBC. When Hillary Clinton did this deal with the Swiss, and these are facts now, you can check them on my website. The Swiss government gave $600,000 to the Clinton Foundation. Bill Clinton got a $1.4 million speaking fee from UBS. We're talking a few months right after the settlement. Now, wait a minute. Isn't that pay for play? Why didn't you get the names? Why didn't you find them properly? Why didn't you indict anyone else? But yet, oh, you got the whistleblower. That's great. I was the only banker to go to jail in a financial crisis.
Wow. I've got a question in my head, and I guarantee you that my viewers and listeners are thinking the exact same thing. Do you fear for your safety, your life?
No.
You do not?
I have a lot of mechanisms in place, and if I have to, quite frankly, if I had to shoot someone, I'd shoot somebody. I have no problem with that.
I just know that, with the amount of money that what you did hurt people financially.
Oh, yeah.
And when you hurt people financially, especially the big firms, they're their own country.
Well, this is it. And I went to military school. I'm pretty well savvy about what goes on. I keep a low profile pretty much. I do travel a lot, but the story has actually, even the FBI went to my attorneys and said, can you tell your client to stop talking bad about us? I said, you put him in jail. What do you expect him to do? Send you flowers? So what I'm doing, in essence, is just exposing the truth. You guys
sometimes that's dangerous, Bradley, and you know that. And I do worry. I'll be honest with you. I worry about you sometimes because I just, what you've done is fantastic. And the 104 million, which sounds huge, if you really look at what you've done positively, that's a drop in the bucket of what you should have been paid.
Precisely.
That's a joke considering the taxes, that last count was over 25 billion that they've recollected. And then the money coming over, getting taxed again and changing the industry for the good. But getting back to the question I asked about, so if it's not happening in Switzerland, where's it happening? Or is there a place it's happening?
It is happening, Stan, and I think the problem is look, there'll always be some sort of shady business going on where envelopes under tables and this kind of nonsense.
Sure.
Black money, as they call it. And there's a great story about the black money, which I'll tell you and your audience, which is a true story, and it's fantastic where the term black money comes from. But remember, if you're a wealthy person and you want to hide money from a spouse, from a business partner, from the tax man, you want to go to a politically stable, economically stable environment. Switzerland was that. It's no longer. I mean, it's still politically and economically stable, but you can't have numbered accounts. You can't have any of BVI companies, none of that. So where do you go? Do you go to Singapore? They're cracking down there as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go to an Eastern European country and trust a bank there? Really? With your 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, and you wake up one morning and it's gone? So the problem is finding a location that you feel that is politically and economically stable, plus that it'll be there tomorrow, and you have someone who's fairly sophisticated who can handle it. But again, now the problem was in Switzerland, it was a cash society. You could literally come in and pick up a suitcase full of $1 million in cash and walk out the door, no questions asked. Those days are over. So even if you had your money in ABC country, how do you get access to it?
But
that's the problem.
Doesn't the current cryptocurrency category start eating in and creating another opportunity for this type of fraud? Even though it's blockchain, I mean, I've done podcasts on the blockchain technology, et cetera, but it seems to me cryptocurrency is the new Switzerland. Am I right?
Well, look what's happened just recently. You're correct. Look at the meat packing company that got extorted. $2-3 million, and they paid in cryptocurrencies. The DOJ was furious. I mean, I said, but hey, if you guys can stop this from happening, maybe people wouldn't have to pay cryptocurrency through bribes and extortion in that matter. But here's the other problem: is that you have all of these different things in which this age of, well, if it's not transparent, then it's got to be illegal. Well, people pay cash. People do all kinds of nefarious things. And the problem is you've allowed these banks to perpetuate this for years, and you've never punished them. I call it political prostitution. You and I go rob Wells Fargo in Miami. We steal $10 million. We get caught, and we say we're sorry, and we give back 8, and we keep 1 each, and we don't go to jail. Well, that's essentially what the banks have been doing. They just write a check. Now think, they made more profit on the illegal business than the fine. So why would you stop? You're setting an awful precedent, and there's no deterrent. That's where Eric Holder and the DOJ are dead wrong. They should be indicted for not doing their job. And as well as on the Republican side, they're wrong as well. These banks have to be held accountable. Trust me, you put a CEO in jail for 2 years, this illegal business ends immediately.
Put him in a real jail, right?
Yeah, well, a real jail, and how about find them properly? I just gave this scenario where you and I rob Wells Fargo. I mean, I do that business with you all day. Never go to jail, say we're sorry, and give back some and keep $1 million each. In essence, look at all these banks, the Goldman Sachs, the Citibanks, Countrywide, all of them did this. Not just auction rate securities, LIBOR fixing, foreign exchange rigging, offshore banking.
Sure.
You don't assess a proper crime, a penalty to the crime. So they're going to keep doing it. It's like a child that says, oh, don't eat candy. They eat the candy. Say, okay, keep eating candy. Well, there's no oversight. There's no penalty.
So in a perfect world where Stanley Newdyman's president and I appoint Bradley Birkenfeld as the czar to prevent fraud, what do you do?
First thing I do is I put together a team of whistleblowers, financial whistleblowers, and I send the message out to all the banks, all the accounting firms, all the law firms, and say, new rodeo in town. Rules have changed. if you break the law, not only are we going to come and really destroy you, like with Arthur Andersen and Enron, I understand they went a little bit far, but well, you were breaking the law. How about that? And you come in and you're going to say that the rules have changed. The rules have changed. Why? Because the taxpayers are fed up with this nonsense. Number one. Number two, you're setting a bad precedent and no deterrent. And we are going to eradicate this so that the next generation doesn't think it's okay to do that. And a real financial team of whistleblowers who have no vested interest in all these companies and can never work for any of these companies ever must come in and do the right job. And we're gonna be harsh. We're gonna hold press conferences. We're gonna name names and do it right, rather than these little secret non-prosecution deals and backroom deals. This is the problem. They've been doing it for so long. It's customary. It's just, this is the way we do business.
Is it doable politically? I mean, in a perfect world, if you had that seat in DC and you're the czar of fraud prevention, is it doable, yes, or is it just a pipe dream?
Well, the problem is the politicians don't want it, and I'm talking about career politicians. I mean, some people like Trump, some people hate Trump, some people hate Biden, some people like Biden. Okay, whatever. I don't care about that. What I care about is getting rid of the career politicians who have been there too long because their buddies up on the Hill, or someone's over at DOJ, or someone's over at CIA. No, I don't care. Look, do you stop at green lights and go through red lights? No, you don't, because the law says you stop at red and you go through green. So why do these guys think they can break the law? So that's where we have to change the whole mindset. And you've got to come in with a whole new group, a fresh group of people. People like a Harry Markopoulos, a friend of mine who exposed Madoff. Sharon Watkins, who exposed Enron, another great whistleblower, and so on and so forth. Why? Because this not only cleans up the crime element in our society, whether it's in the military, financial, pharmaceutical, construction, it's everywhere. Then the taxpayer says, wow, you're actually doing something to clean up this mess because we're paying higher prices for this corruption. And that's where if someone gave you the mandate, like a president would have to do it most likely, a cabinet post, it's needed. It's needed so much because the most successful law in America, and you can go check it, your audience can check it, is Senator Grassley's whistleblowing law, has brought more money back to the US Treasury than all laws combined. So you eradicate the crime, you bring money back from the crime, and remember, I got paid from the crime, not from the taxpayer. So the taxpayer is actually benefiting because they're paying me pennies on the dollar from the crime I exposed, and the rest of it comes back to the government. I mean, you should have 100 Brad Birkenfelds.
But does that work? And I'm just talking out loud because our listeners and viewers are saying, wait a minute, instinctively we all kind of know that this is happening, but to hear it from the person that was the originator of it, that it's continuing, it's a little disturbing, obviously. And my thing now is, okay, let's just say that we could do that and whistleblow and all that stuff. If the media is not telling the truth, then it's a complete mess, right?
Well, that's another component of it. If you don't communicate it effectively to the audience, and your audience is not just these podcasts, it's on television, on radio, in newspaper, magazines, and so forth. So you need a concerted effort where you're going to say, why are we doing what we're doing? Well, we're doing it for this. The taxpayers are fed up. We're eradicating crimes and corruption. We're getting the money back into the system, and we're sending a message. And if you don't like it, get out of the way, or we're going to run you over. And hey, this is big boy stuff now. This is not like, oh, geez, don't hurt us aliens and this and that. No, this is about the reality of life. And there's too much corruption in our system. Like I told you, like the pharmaceutical, finance, construction. How about the military? Oh, there's no corruption there, right? We're paying $50 million for a plane. I mean, there's no wiggle room there to negotiate those prices. I mean, the whole thing's a mess. So I think the taxpayers getting fed up, really fed up. And look, everyone has their palms greased somewhere. Like my cousin works for Boeing or Raytheon.
Sure.
I understand that. That doesn't mean you have to be gouging us and ripping the American taxpayer off. And then if you come back to my story about finance, this is not just about the US and Switzerland and UBS. UBS was doing this around the world. Tokyo, Australia, South Africa, Argentina. then what does it get into? It gets into the real bigger issue of, okay, whether you cheat on taxes or hide it from your wife or your business partner, that's okay, that's one thing. And that's not good, but okay. But what about dictators? Like Arafat's got his money in Geneva. So did Marcos and Bhutto and all these clowns. But the US is the largest offshore center in the world today. Why? Because they turned a blind eye to all these offshore companies who have money. You don't want to take my word for it? Go look at the New York Times, who talks about Joe Biden's Delaware. Delaware's a nightmare. You've got more convicts putting money there, and they've done nothing. So what essentially the U.S. government has said is, we're going to whack you, Switzerland, and we'll make an example of Birkenfeld. Okay, fine, whatever. I know you're wrong and I'm right, but that's another thing. Secondly, you now open the doors to all these nefarious acts. And I can trust you. Bloomberg did an article on this about saying the greatest offshore tax haven is America now. North and South Dakota. You've got Delaware. You've got Nevada. Why are all these places being able to hide money for all these really bad people? I mean, foreigners like Ukrainians and Russians and South Americans. Oh, that's right. The banks make money. The accountants make money. The lawyers make money. The trustees make money. The politicians make money. And there you go. And Joe Biden's Delaware is a perfect example. Has he done anything to fix Delaware?
No.
Nothing.
No.
There was a 12-page. Yeah, there was a 12-page article on the internet about during his vice presidency, talking about how Delaware is one of the most corrupt states in the nation for this offshore business. This is what's troubling. Why wouldn't he do anything? Because those people are paying his campaign.
Right.
And so on and so forth. So that's where you need someone like me and a group of people like me and a dedicated group of people who have no vested interest except to expose these people and make sure that the justice is served, not favors passed out, which we've seen time and time again.
Now, are you helping current whistleblowers? I mean, are you advising people? I think you are. And I'm assuming that's all confidential as well as it should be. But do you see people coming to you for advice, sitting at the foot of the master and the originator? And are you encouraged by that? Or are you discouraged by a low number of them? What's going on?
Whistleblowing has taken on a whole new development. I just was in Romania helping them write the law there with my attorneys in Washington to help them pass legislation. But you still have the vestiges of the communist mentality, like, oh, I'm snitching on my neighbor and this kind of thing. No, but you got to come to the 21st century now. Wake up. And so that was very important for me. And the EU directive on whistleblowing, and it's on my website. It's a 16-page document that my attorney and I sent to the EU. They never responded. What a surprise. So by the end of this year, all the countries have to pass their whistleblowing initiative on EU directive. So I do help governments. I've testified in the Greek embassy in Washington, D.C., helped the Greek government. I helped the Indian government. I've helped the German government, the Norwegian government, and so forth. And then I help individual whistleblowers because they're the ones who are most fragile and volatile. Why? Because what people do generally is they attack the whistleblower. Jess Staley, the CEO of Barclays, tried to uncover a whistleblower twice, got caught at it, got fined, I think £500,000. And I wrote I got interviewed by Bloomberg and I said, no, he should be fired immediately. And the fact that the board kept him shows that the board should be fired immediately. Why? You're condoning bad behavior. And he was saying, well, we don't think we should be paying whistleblowers a lot of money. It's not a question of paying them the money. It's a question of right or wrong. If we expose you doing wrong things, you have no say in what's going to be paid to the whistleblower. Let the legislators figure that out. And what's happened, as I said before, the whistleblowing awards come from the crime they expose. So I have friends who have exposed. I was with the whistleblowers in Greece who exposed Novartis. They were selling drugs illegally. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, boom, $540 million. Very proud of that one. But the attaché at the U.S. Embassy, FBI agent, was interfering in this. So I sent my book to him. I write about it in my book. I said, that's a crime to do this. He said, well, I didn't get your book. I said, well, if you're not at the embassy and didn't get the book, how would you know you didn't get my book? I just had to courier it over there. I said, you're a liar. Yeah. So this guy, the attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Athens, was interfering on the Novartis case. Why? the attorneys representing the whistleblowers I met with confidentially, they were telling me, hey, we need your help on it. I said, leave it to me. I'll be happy to call the guy. Give me his phone number. And I called him. And I sent him my book over to the embassy. He didn't like that. He's probably tapping my phone. Big deal.
You should have a new card. Your new card should read Global Cleanup Specialist.
Right. We clean houses like the mafia clean houses.
Hey, one last segment with you and I. I really want your opinion on it. No one has the perfect answer, but I believe that cryptocurrency obviously is not going away. Blockchain's not going away, but I do believe, having worked for the large banks like you have, I work for Morgan Stanley and UBS, paying Weber, Dean Witter, and all that stuff. Not at the highest levels like you did, but it's hard for me to believe that the banks aren't going to create their own and control it with governments and tell these other people that are creating them that, oh, by the way, that's not worth anything and we don't recognize it, and just wipe it off the board. That's my conspiracy theorist, glass half empty, pessimistic realist approach. What do you think is going to happen? Because it's early in the game for crypto. Where do you think that's headed?
I think it's not a conspiracy theory. I think your experience and your background serves you well. And the other thing you have to ask yourself is, let's just deviate slightly and take medical marijuana. All the pharmaceutical companies said, this is crap. Oh, no, this is bullshit. It's against the law. We don't want it. So you have medicinal, recreational, okay, whatever. Whether you like it or not, that's not the point. The point was this: people started growing these farms, and then all of a sudden the laws started to change, and the pharmaceuticals said, shit, we're missing the boat here. So what did they do? Started coming in and buying it. It's the same with crypto.
That's a great correlation, by the way. Great.
Right? That analogy is ideal because it shows that they poo-poo it, then the young entrepreneurs make it, and then they buy them out. Okay, you buy out, you sell out, you made your money or whatever. But then crypto's the same. They pooing it. Some people don't understand it. They think it's weird. Okay, it's unusual. Fine. But it's exactly the same, because what they're saying is, we want to control it. And then they'll work with the governments. Why do you think on medical marijuana, the pharmaceuticals are pushing so that this is across the board? And then, oh, geez, your health insurance and life insurance will pay for it. Oh, forget it. This is off the chart. Billions for a drug and billions for a cryptocurrency.
So you do believe that? I mean, the United States government is not just going to watch this.
Oh no, they're going to make their money.
They're going to either create somewhere. They're going to create what I call U.S. coin or Patriot coin or something, and then all of the banks will be in cahoots with them. And I said before that blockchain is going to allow them to tax daily. Forget April 15th. They'll be able to tax it. And I think that's really going to be the impetus for the government to get involved. But they're certainly not going to watch a private company name the cryptocurrency company that you like and get and just grow and grow and grow and grow. This is, I mean,
and it's similar. It's similar with the offshore. I remember when they had the banking. I knew Calvin Air, the very famous guy from Bodog. Very interesting guy. U.S. government hated him. He was offshore. He kept thumbing his nose at him, and he was making millions. Now, people are going to gamble. Whether you gamble in your office for a football pool, you go to Vegas and gamble, or you go buy a stupid lottery ticket down the street, it's gambling. But if they can't control it, get their cut, you're exactly right, Stan. They're going to come in and whack you. And that's where it's from marijuana to gambling to crypto. There it is. Those are the three examples right there. Perfect examples.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the press conference where the government and U.S. Treasury comes out and says, we're introducing the U.S. coin or Patriot coin or whatever they want to call it. And all of these other ones, we really appreciate it. But at this point, we're not going to recognize you. Now, I know the crypto people say, Stan, this is going to happen. But I just want you to think, I want people and our listeners to think about, if that happens, and it probably will, what happens to the valuations of some of these companies? It's going to be
This is really scary. This is very scary because it's like an accounting problem with the euro when the euro came into effect.
Correct.
How do you value assets? How do you value? Oh, so you lower the liabilities and increase the assets? I mean, how does that work when one currency goes to another and you superimpose a fixed exchange rate? This is very dangerous, extremely. And then you've got things such as annuities and pensions.
Sure.
How does that affect them? I mean, this is crazy. Yeah.
I agree. Let's talk about your book a little bit in the last segment before we have to let you go and enjoy Malta, for goodness sakes. I'm holding up the book for the viewers on the Fun with Annuities podcast YouTube channel, and it's called Lucifer's Banker. lucifersbanker.com. You can buy it on Amazon. You'll get it the next day, and you'll never put it down. I found fascinating while I'm reading the book, and I really appreciate you putting some pictures inside of it. Not because I'm an ex-athlete that likes to look at pictures and not read, but it kind of told the story visually, which I really appreciated. You know, the just every little picture was fun, and the one with Mel Gibson and Kevin Costner. Maybe you can close with the little story about our friend Kevin Costner, and he wasn't dancing with wolves; he was dancing with money, right?
Oh yeah, he was Elliot Ness with the Untouchables. Yeah, Mr. Taxman. Yeah. Look, and I've said this to the DOJ, I've said it to the IRS, I said it to the U.S. Senate, I said it to the SEC, and I gave them a list of names. One of them was Kevin Costner, had 20 million plus offshore undeclared money. Fact, I'm suing him now in the state of Florida, by the way. The case got thrown out because they said it wasn't the jurisdiction, but I lived in Miami when I launched the book, and they threatened me with letters. So we're appealing that right now. Sure. Kevin Costner, we're appealing him. There were people like Leonard Lauder. Estee Lauder was my account. When she died, I had her death certificate. I guess we should call them Estee Frauder because they've been frauding all the American people.
Very nice.
And the son, Leonard Lauder's a fraud. He had an account with my boss. And the court in Florida threw his case out just last week, where they said jurisdiction's not Florida, it should be New York. I said, no, you're wrong. I mean, the courts are a disaster. Anyways, what I did was my boss managed Kevin Costner's account, and I used to handle his currency allocation. Mm-hmm. So for Kevin Costner to say that he didn't have an offshore account and his lawyers spewing all this nonsense, I put a sworn affidavit in place. I went to the DOJ, IRS, SEC, U.S. Senate, and gave his name. So you should be indicting me for lying to you. But the real question is, to the American people in your audience, why wasn't he indicted? You're not allowed to come in the offshore voluntary disclosure program if they already had your name, which I gave his name way back in 2007. So what gives?
Bradley, he can't play the lead role in your movie, obviously, so he's off the board. But I do want you to have this movie done because I want you to. They have to invite you to the Hollywood parties. I want that.
Exactly.
I want you to be there. I want you to be with all these people that that really, I guess, don't like the truth, right? Or don't like the truth exposed about them. And they put on this facade of, I'm a good person, perfect person. Kind of as to close this out, for the listeners who are just typical, and I'm sure Americans, and I'm sure we have some listeners overseas as well. What do you tell them? I mean, this is earth-shattering stuff, and it's a little unnerving to know the truth, even though in the back of your mind you know these things are happening. What would you tell the people? Is there hope, or is this just going to continue, this type of fraud?
Whistleblowing program is a very good program, and it should be supported. That's number one. That's how we're going to get the truth out there. Okay. You're going to get from A to Z from someone, not just little cherry picking. No, the whistleblower will give you it all. Why? Because they have a vested interest to come forward and tell it all and not to play games. That's the first thing. The second thing is the government is corrupt. The U.S. government is highly corrupt. Okay. You can't trust the DOJ or the FBI or the CIA. You really can't. Everything from whether they're spying, that Snowden exposed. I met with Julian Assange twice at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and he gave me a wealth of information about Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. I mean, these people are evil. They're very evil. Whether you like or hate him is another issue. Sure. But the very fact of the matter is that the system that we base ourselves on, what we believe in, is rotten at the core. And I say that candidly, and I can give facts to it. So I think what people need to understand is support whistleblowers. Don't believe everything the government tells you because it's not true. And we need more transparency and accountability in our lives so that we can feel like we're not being cheated, whether you're buying your condo or a car or a business or whatever it might be. And that is really the essence of this. And I think my book, I get into it quite heavily. Yeah. And for instance, I exposed, the first client I gave them was a gentleman who was doing illegal oil sales with Saddam Hussein. But because he was connected politically, they said, we're not interested in non-Americans. And I said, well, if you're not interested, were you interested in the non-Americans that flew the planes into the World Trade Center? They were non-Americans. So I always got to fight with them. I mean, it's nerve-wracking because it upsets you when you have the facts and the truth and you know it, and they do nothing about it.
Yeah, and it's both Republicans and Democrats. I don't care where you land politically.
Right.
Don't be fooled. It's happening. If it's big money, it's happening. But I think this has been fascinating, Bradley. I certainly want you back, and I'd like to have you back after the crypto stuff starts settling and we start seeing some moves being made by governments. And I'm sure you're following that, but you being who you are, and just world renowned from the standpoint of just truth and uncovering the real story. I want to know what you're going to talk about when it comes to crypto, because this is going to be the next one. We can call it the next Switzerland, right? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it might be. It's the next bombshell for people, and I'm assuming the rich and the terrorists, and they're using it for nefarious ways, just like they were using Swiss bank accounts as well.
Well, this is it, and I'd love to come down to Florida in person to do it after say maybe in the fourth quarter. Why? We're going to have the crypto. We'll have some things developing there.
Great.
Certainly, we're going to have the verdict in the Paris trial. That'll come out in September, so we could talk about that. And that's interesting because that shows the disparity between how the French outdid the Americans in fighting UBS. And again, remember, your audience has to look at this from the global standpoint of offshore banking, what it has changed in the world to become more transparent and accountable. But coming back to the other issue, cryptocurrency, gaming, and marijuana. The government wants to get their hands in.
Very good. That's a good way to close it out. Remember, everybody, lucifersbanker.com. Go to amazon.com. You pull up Lucifer's Banker, or you can pull up Bradley Birkenfeld. For the people on the YouTube channel, you're seeing Bradley hold up the book. For the people on the podcast platforms, we will have those links on my website at theannuityman.com, so you can go to Bradley's site. You can buy the book. But Bradley, I really appreciate you being with us. And any last words before I close this out?
I would just tell people, look at what's going on in the world today in the offshore world. Everybody wants to pay zero tax. That's not the way the world works. So let's just pay our fair share, not an extreme amount, but a fair share. Mm-hmm. All live together in harmony and make it work. And let's clean up society.
I love it. Bradley Birkenfeld, thank you so much for joining us on Fun with Annuities, the #1 annuity podcast on the planet, where our saying here is live in the reality, not the dream. We will see you next week. Thanks for listening to Fun with Annuities. Please hit the subscribe button and make sure to go to my site at theannuityman.com, where you can run your own SPIA, DIA, and QLAC quotes and see a live feed of the best MYGA fixed rates in the country, and even get indexed and income rider quotes as well. You can also sign up for my 6 annuity owner's manual books, and I'll ship them for free and under no obligation. I also encourage you to schedule a one-on-one call with me, Stan the Annuity Man, so we can have a full discussion of your specific situation. It will be the best brutally factual and truthful advice you will ever get, and that's one guarantee you should definitely take advantage of. So join me next time for the #1 annuity podcast on the planet, Fun with Annuities.